we were on a good path to that holy grail of the retirement years as a couple.
Mhm.
We were on that path as a couple. And absolutely, it changes your future path when you are taking that accumulation and dividing it into two households. Things are going to change, things are going to be different. But I cannot answer that question, am I going to be okay financially, without taking the big step back and helping my clients see what their overall financial situation is first.
I want every woman, every person who's going through a divorce to understand that they do have rights and that we shouldn't just be surrendering, because we want to avoid conflict, because 10 years later, 15 years later down the line, it makes a difference in our retirements, in our quality of life.
What if the best chapter of your life hasn't even begun yet? What lies within you is the power to live brighter, bolder, and truer than ever before. So welcome to Vivitude, where caregiving, connections, and career come into balance, and where your vitality, vision, and voice shines through. Because the revolution isn't out there, it's already within you. Welcome to Vivitude.
Welcome to Vivitude. This is Kate Phillips, and I am your purpose and prosperity host for all things financial and occupational wellness. And today we have a fascinating topic that impacts a whole lot of people here in the United States, and that is the topic of divorce. If you are a caregiver, you know that life can get complicated, that family can get complicated, and sometimes those complications can add stress on a marriage, and you might be finding yourself wondering if that marriage is going to hold together, or you may find yourself in a position where your spouse is letting you know, guess what? We are going to be going in separate directions. And I have a resource today. This woman, she is such an expert, Shelly Rees Randall. She is a certified divorce financial analyst, a certified divorce coach. We are going to talk about finances and divorce. Welcome, Shelly.
Thank you, Kate. So happy to be here.
I am so thrilled to have you and a little bit more about you. And I'll be asking you about those certifications, but you have been through your own journey. You also were involved with, uh, as a financial advisor or a financial manager before your divorce. So tell me about your journey into how you got here, where you are now helping other folks on this path.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that. One thing I like to joke about is that no one ever says when they're asked in elementary school, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a divorce coach. It's just, it's not a thing that until you have your own life experience that you consider joining into this industry. So you are
Yes.
you are correct. When my son started kindergarten, I have one lovely son who's now a teenager. I joined a financial advisory firm, got my licenses, was an assistant financial planner, and then moved to working in a tax firm for 7 years. In the middle of that decade in the financial industry, my husband asked for a divorce. And it was unwanted by me, but it was not unexpected. So we had been together for 20 plus years and married for 18 of those. And there were definitely the stresses, the kind of ordinary stresses that over time built up. And we did lose that respect for each other that contributes to a good marriage. If you don't have that, you really don't have a marriage that you want to stay in. So I'm sure some of your listeners can understand this. I,
That
however,
is
was a
true.
was so practical about it. I just thought we would stay together until our son graduated from high school. Just thought
Mm.
that to me was just the logical conclusion of where we were headed. But you cannot control your spouse. And if one person wants out, it only takes one to initiate a divorce in the United States. So you don't
Yeah.
have to agree to it, but
Mhm.
you have to go through the process and very likely get out the other side getting divorced.
Yes, I've been through it myself as well. And we had actually, our daughter was quite young when we went through it. We were married a total of 17 years. But I know that, from that experience and seeing other people walk through it, there's better ways and there's worse ways to get divorced, whether that involves your parenting or your finances or how you walk through it in a way that in integrity and in also protecting yourself. I would love for you to share when people come to you, like what are the first things that they should know, or maybe some
Mm,
mistakes to avoid.
great question. Well, let me answer that question by backing up a step and saying, I believe that how you start your divorce sets the tone
Mm.
for the entire process. And you have a lot of control in the process, even if you were not the one who initiated it. So I
Mm.
say this to give you some hope if an unwanted divorce is knocking on your door. You still have a lot of control into how you respond, about how you respond. So the very first thing that I would say is you should try to get a little educated about the process, especially if it's the first time you've been through it. Or for some of my
Mhm.
clients, they had a very early marriage. They were divorced in their 20s, but that was easy because they didn't have kids. They didn't even own a home, or they had just bought a home and they just sold it and moved on. They really didn't have career assets they had accumulated. So that divorce is going to be very different than the divorce they have 20 years later now, with
Mhm.
all the accumulations of a middle class marriage. And that's my target audience. It's folks come to me and they say, am I going to be okay financially? That's the first question that they want to have addressed. And it's because they've been okay in their marriage. They were like me and my husband. We were on a good path to that holy grail of the retirement years as a couple.
Mhm.
We were on that path as a couple. And absolutely, it changes your future path when you are taking that accumulation and dividing it into two households. Things are going to change, things are going to be different. But I cannot answer that question, am I going to be okay financially, without taking the big step back and helping my clients see what their overall financial situation is first. So I know we'll talk more about this, but I have a signature framework. I call this Finances First framework. And I say, let's start with your financial picture. Let's get you empowered so that you really understand what you're talking about, what there is to divide. And that actually informs what divorce process you choose. So this is a very important point I'd like for your listeners to know, is if you are facing divorce or contemplating it, you can choose many different paths of divorce. There's many different legal ways to do it. There's many different ways to do it, to interact with your partner when you're making all the decisions. It doesn't have to be that you each hire lawyers right out of the gate and go down the legal path.
Yes, yes. We ended up eventually having a very amicable divorce in terms of especially the finances. But we eventually just kind of agreed to use one lawyer, which is really unusual. But we agreed in principle, together before, and then we just needed somebody to draw it up. But we had a much simpler situation. I'm curious, I'm guessing you probably mostly work with women, but I'd love to hear your perspective on what are some of the differences in the challenges faced by your clients who are women. And I'm guessing you may work with men as well. Is that true?
It's true. Yeah, absolutely. I don't draw I don't turn away men. I don't turn away same-sex couples. Or if you're not actually married, you're in what Washington state is called a committed intimate relationship, or a CIR. Each state has their own definition of the rights accorded to those who are in intimate relationships but not married. And I
Is
do
that
work
like
with all of those.
a domestic partnership of what that's the phrase I usually think when the state says you're a couple?
Yes, but Washington doesn't have that language in our statute.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so actually, to this point, I do want to emphasize that the divorce rules and customs, I mean, laws, rules, and customs within the judiciary are very state specific. So I
Mm.
first want to say that hiring somebody who can help you get the lay of the land in your jurisdiction, which we start with just the state as your container. And then you may want to actually have someone who can help you understand the judge, the county that you live in, and the judges who operate there, if it comes to that. But you want to start with some state specific advice. That's why you don't go hire an attorney who's in a different state. You just wouldn't do
Yes.
that for a family law case.
And
And
you've
so,
also pointed out that there's a problem with Googling. We're used to maybe going to Google or Chat GPT. What are some of the downfalls of that
oh gosh,
approach?
the downfalls of that are just so many. I call it the Google rabbit hole. And while there's a ton of great information out there, and I definitely encourage, I think that you should be Googling your questions and getting some different angles on it. You really can't trust the advice that an internet search or chat gpt will give you, even if you specify which state you're in. It is I have seen chat gpt, which I use in my business in a prescribed way. It has made blatant mistakes that I know are untrue, and I worry that would lead someone in a direction that would ultimately, first of all, not be able to potentially their settlement agreement might not be able to be enacted. If they went ahead and did a
Mm,
DIY
mm.
divorce and they did all the paperwork themselves and they relied on ChatGPT for their legal advice, they could actually find themselves with a signed agreement that the judge has approved that they cannot execute. So that would be the worst case scenario, is that you actually have just bad legal advice from the internet. We started a lot of questions here, so I want to circle back to this and say, it's not that you shouldn't be Googling or asking ChatGPT for to give some insight on your questions, but you really shouldn't be walking this journey alone and asking your cousin who got
Yes.
divorced in a different state what they did. That is just not going to be a very productive path for you. And with so much else going on, right? Divorce is already incredibly stressful. I would say I would like to help remove that piece of anxiety, which is like, am I even getting good advice?
Yes. So who would you want on your team, understanding that maybe in your situation you might have some different team members? And then I'm going to be asking you about your specific, you've got some great certifications, and what do those mean? But who is it that you need on your team if you're, looking at this, looking at a divorce and how to navigate it, with integrity or protect
Yeah.
yourself in the process?
I mean, I can say I like my clients to have an attorney, a therapist, and a coach, and a financial expert. And I can actually cover two of those bases by being their coach and a financial expert. But then I'm not a therapist and I'm not an attorney. And in the end, divorce is a legal process that you must
Mhm.
complete. So, so you do need it. Everyone, I think, needs some kind of legal advisor, even if that's doing some kind of online paperwork that is that service has somebody with some legal oversight, or a firm which is overseeing it. But that said, I actually think that is my high level advice, but it's not advice specific to any one of your listeners. So
Mhm.
I do like to say that just like personal finance, divorce is very personal. So there's really not global answers of like, you need to have these people on your team. It depends. I mean, do you and your spouse own a home? Okay, that's one complication. Does it have an outstanding mortgage? That's another complication. Does one of you want to
Mhm.
stay in the house? That is actually probably the hardest complication. If one of you wants to keep a house, I would say that actually is a lot. Most of my clients, the majority of my clients, are in that situation. They
Mhm.
own a home together, and one of them would like to keep it. I have to say, right there, we're talking much negotiation to understand their options, and I can tell your listeners about some of the other certified professionals who can help with the home, and the lending process. So that is one answer to the question of who do you need. But you might need a parenting coach, or you might need
Mhm.
a therapist who can help you and your spouse, if you both agree to talk things over with a third party. Um, I typically, I mean, I have to refer on those cases. So I
Sure.
I do I help with my piece of the puzzle which is the finances. And I wanted to circle back to your very original question to say that I think anyone can benefit from a financially focused divorce coach, such as myself. Men, women. I actually do see a little bit of a different take there typically, but I tend to work with the project manager of the divorce. They're the ones who are actually
Mm.
being the most proactive about understanding the finances. They may have a more passive spouse who's like, just give me a proposal. Well, great. I can help one spouse craft that proposal. And I usually like to have there be multiple proposals that they're okay with all of them. And then they may be able to take that and present that to their spouse either at a kitchen table conversation or in mediation. We can talk a
Hmm.
little bit
Hmm.
about mediators if you'd like, because there's different types of mediators to consider too, depending on your situation. Um, and then they can actually get themselves pretty far down that divorce journey. And I can help them with some mediation preparation so they can negotiate well for themselves. And then maybe all it is back to what you said, they just have an agreement that one attorney can draw up or a paralegal can draw up. So there's lots of different ways to skin this cat. Um, and the most important thing is to get advice early on. So you're just not spinning your wheels.
Yes, I can really see the value of having a coach. I know, and probably listeners out there also know women that, and I'm saying women, I don't think this is unique to women, but I certainly know women that they want to avoid conflict. And so I know women that did not negotiate for really what was even rightfully, owed, that they had, how they had helped both of them become very successful, and then they kind of walked away with peanuts, because they didn't want the conflict. So that's, I assume that's also the sort of thing that you deal with, not only letting women know what their rights are, but even, experiencing that, like we need to. I've just been going through a completely different sort of legal situation. And what it prompted in me was, I'm like, I have to stand up for myself. Like, this is really important to stand up for myself, to learn my rights. I've been, talking with lawyers about something and understanding my rights. And if anything, I think the people who poked me, I'm like, wow, they woke up something in me, and so I want every woman, every person who's going through a divorce to understand that they do have rights, and that we shouldn't just be surrendering, because we want to avoid conflict, because 10 years later, 15 years later down the line, it makes a difference in our retirements, in our quality of life, all of that.
Not only does it make a difference, I say that divorce is likely the biggest financial transaction of your life,
Mm,
bar none.
mm.
It's more than making your college decision, more than making the decision just to buy a house, or even to start a career. Which track are you going to go to graduate school? Because it's actually the sum result of all of those decisions is what you then need to divide.
Yes. And looking through some of your content, I also saw you make a point that there are situations where you might end up better off, not because of a settlement, but because of being able to have more control over your own finances. So talk to me about that dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we're also in a transition with the women's rights movement, right? Like let's just acknowledge how far we have come with women
Hmm.
being able to open your own checking account and own property. I mean, we're talking about in our lifetimes, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
this is where your divorce is not your mama's divorce. And
Mm.
it is so different now. Women are legally on an equal footing. Okay, we still have a ways to go in some other areas of parity, right, and equity, but at least in the law and here in Washington State, which I'm a subject matter expert in, um, there should be a fair and equitable division of anything that was earned or acquired during the marriage. So, to your point about women that do walk away from some of the financial assets that they are probably due, sometimes that's just a simple misunderstanding, like, oh, the 401k is in his name, the spouse's name.
Mm.
Oh, But then this is where I say, I just want everything on a list. I work with them to get organized. And then I say, but when did he start contributing to this? Was some of it before the marriage, or was it all entirely during the marriage? We do need to tease that out. And depending on which state you're in, the earnings on any contributions may or may not be marital property. But in Washington state, it's generally considered that anything earned and acquired, including the earnings on investments, is all part of the marital estate. So, like, part of this is just getting educated about what is true in your state. And you must find that out from a reputable source. And that is where a certified divorce financial analyst is the top credential in the divorce space for getting assistance with your finances. Many financial advisors get that credential so they can better help their clients. However, I think that unless your financial advisor that you already have on your team has that credential, you probably want to be looking for a CDFA who has a standalone practice helping divorcing individuals or couples. And then you can go to them just for that purpose. So I work only with individuals at this point in time. So I'm more on the advocacy side, but there are many, many CDFAs, and there's a directory, which is linked on my website, that will work with couples. So if your main concerns are financial and you and your spouse can communicate, like if you're fairly amicable going into the process, why not seek out the services of a certified divorce financial analyst and start with the financial picture?
Yes, yes. I think that makes a lot of sense. And differentiate for me, you're a certified divorce financial analyst. You also, I think, began as a certified divorce coach. How do you differentiate those?
Sure. And I will say, I actually started as a financial coach. This wasn't part of my introduction, but while I was working in the personal finance industry, I actually decided to branch out and start my own business doing personal financial coaching outside of the accounting firm, and with the blessing of my employer. And so I did that for 3 years until my own divorce landed in my lap. And that is when, in my own research about how to navigate divorce, which was my first and hopefully only, I found out that divorce coaching was a thing. And being a coach already, a trained financial coach, I thought, well, this is great. I really want to know what a divorce coach does. So I found the longest running certification program in the US, which is the CDC Certified Divorce Coach Program. It was a 4-month program. We did mentoring within it. It was very rigorous. And we have continuing education requirements every year to keep our certification up. So I feel confident that I got good training as a divorce coach. We, however, did a segment on the finances, but divorce coaching in and of itself is not financially focused. That's my unique spin on this. Unfortunately, there are not enough of us, I feel. Many people who are in the financial services arena choose to go in different directions, but I happen to love my niche. I happen to really love being a coach first and a financial consultant second. So for now, that is my jam. But there are a couple of other divorce coaching certification programs out there. You definitely want to look for a certification. So if you're researching divorce coaches and someone says, I'm a divorce coach because I got divorced myself, and now I help other women through the process, or, it's like what other training have they done? You might want to look and see if they are already a mental health specialist. Sometimes therapists come up through this channel to become divorce coaches. Sometimes attorneys actually will shift from doing litigation to doing divorce coaching. Those are very interesting professionals. So,
I'll bet.
Yeah, lots and lots of people have jumped on the divorce coaching bandwagon because it really helps us help our clients with the whole gamut of the emotions they're experiencing. We get kind of like teasers for all the different areas you might have trouble in, all of the different parental alienation that might be happening with your children, right down to like, what are the different custody plans that make sense, 3-3-5 or week on, week off. And, so we learn a little bit about everything. And I love that. I mean, we did a whole session on dating, and I was like, oh, this is cool, because in the end, I've never gone on the dating apps, but I got trained in like how to help your clients understand what it's like to get back out there. So I just loved it. And I started divorce coaching in 2022. So this is my 5th year of doing this. And now I just do the divorce coaching. I quit my part-time job a year ago. So I'm now full-time financially focused divorce coach. And
Yay. So I'm imagining that divorce coaching deals with the whole person. You talked about dating apps and then you also, deal with their finances, which are very specific and very state specific. I think that's a really great point. Do you work with people outside of Washington State, or does it just depend on the
I
state?
can, but if I'm really
Mhm.
going to dive in deep with you, because I offer like a 6 month support program, I prefer that you be in Washington State so I can be the best coach for you. And
Yeah.
as an example, here in Washington State, we have a 90-day waiting period. All right, that's just is. Every single state is different. Some states have none. A couple of states have year-long waiting periods. To me, that is just such a radically different cadence to a divorce. So I've been trained in Washington State customs and the cadence, and that is my preference. I think I'm the best
Hmm.
coach for Washington State individuals. And I will say the earlier the better. I think I just like to say that even if you're contemplating divorce, if you're the one who might be initiating, one of the really important things that a financial analysis can bring you is some clarity on the timing of the divorce.
Mm.
And I'll give you an example. Well, first of all, from my own life, if I had chosen, I would have not gotten divorced during COVID. I was just like, this is not great timing, was kind of what I came down to, right?
Life complicated enough.
The
Yeah.
unwanted but not unexpected. I was just, can we just wait a little longer? But and we did take a breath. We took some breaths and we didn't rush it. But there might be other things going on in your life that you want to wait through. Now, a great
Mm.
example. So I'll give you one really specific financial example, and then we can talk a little bit about back to the children and the caregiving, right?
Mhm.
I think that's
Mhm.
really pertinent for your listeners.
Yeah.
One example of the timeline for a divorce is that is around Social Security benefits. And I want to bring this up
Mm.
because there are often misunderstandings about these. And they're even more important for gray and silver divorces, right? Those that are happening after age 50. So you actually don't divide Social Security benefits in a divorce.
Mm. Okay.
However, there are divorced spouse benefits, and there are actually divorced
Yes.
widow or widower benefits that you can qualify for. So,
Okay.
what I like people to know is that you need to be married for 10 years in order for those to apply.
Yes.
Now there's other
And
some
it doesn't
exceptions.
hurt.
Yeah,
And I know enough to know that it doesn't hurt if you take benefits, divorce spouse, divorce benefits. It doesn't
it
hurt.
doesn't affect your spouse's benefit, and
Yeah.
they never will know that you are drawing a benefit based on theirs. But to the point being, I have had consultations with folks who are literally 9 years in, and I'm like, well, your divorce is probably going to take a year because that's just on average how long it takes from start to finish. So just make sure that final decree is stamped and signed by the judge after your 10-year anniversary. So they can negotiate with, they can know that and negotiate with that. um but caregiving and kids, oh my gosh, I think this is actually why the rise in gray divorce, which has kind of come back into the conversation nationally after Oprah had it on her show in the fall. I've gotten a lot more inquiries, actually, I think, about my services because she brought this conversation to the fore. Thank you, Oprah. And um, it's worth looking at. Do you divorce while your kids are still minors? Or if one of your children, if your final children, your youngest child is a senior in high school, maybe you do wait to make your statement of intention until after they have graduated. If you can avoid having to do all the parenting plan paperwork, you cut down your paperwork by about 2/3 in the legal process. Not that I help fill
Yes.
out paperwork, but I can just be like, it's just a lot simpler if you're not having to file all that with the court. It doesn't mean that you're not going to co-parent, and that you
Mhm.
still may want to negotiate how you're going to support this child or your other fledged adult children financially. But
Yeah.
you're
And
not
I
required
remember
to in
even
Washington State.
even just going through a separation, you had to do all of that stuff. We had to have the parenting plan, like you don't even avoid it by going through a separation. You've got to go there. Yeah.
And then I would think that caring for an elderly parent is
Hmm.
another, or relative, is another
Yeah.
big life factor that I would consider with my clients, is to try to map that onto some sort of timeline. I always do a timeline with my clients, and we revisit it and we update it as we need to. Um, and actually, if there is end of life issues that you can, there's some certainty, and whatever inheritance might be coming to you might also be a piece of financial security that could launch you into this next chapter. I know we can never count on an inheritance, but
Mm-mm.
some caregivers know that there will be something, and an inheritance is not marital property.
Mm.
So it is a
Okay.
gift. I mean, it's considered a gift or an inheritance. Um, and so it's really important, though, that you not take a check and deposit it into a joint account.
Yes.
This is
Don't do
very,
that.
don't do that.
Nobody
Don't
do
don't
that.
ever do that. And honestly, if you're going to get an inheritance and you are also thinking about getting divorced, that is an excellent time to get some pre-education from a divorce financial expert and a family law attorney, so that you can handle
Yes.
that inheritance properly.
And I'm sure you're a great person to meet with, even if you don't know that you want the divorce or not, you just want to understand better. I love this statement. This is from some notes that you gave me. It says, I'm not pro-divorce, but I am pro-financial empowerment. And I love what's also happened to some of your clients.
Well, I mean, I have definitely met with some folks who were contemplating and they've decided to stay married. um,
Yeah.
but with a really different setup,
Yeah.
to the point of, I mean, one case study. I mean, I could totally see the case for getting divorced. And when we did the marital estate assignment, where we got all of the property and all the investment accounts onto one spreadsheet, that's how I helped her get organized. I was like, you own another house across town? Oh yeah, we rent that out. What if one of you went and lived in that house for a while and you just got some space from each other? They did that, and 6 months later, just the whole divorce issue was dropped. They're making it work by living apart together.
I love it. So they discovered that how they were living, how they were doing their marriage wasn't working for them, but there was another possibility. That's why it's so important to explore possibilities. I also want to ask you about something you shared in a different interview that I loved. First of all, you said how rare it was for anybody to come to you with a prenup and what their default prenup actually is.
Yeah. So I asked that question on my onboarding questionnaire, and to date, I have had one person's mark the box that they have a prenup. Wow, and she was a special case. That no wonder she had a prenup. I helped her get divorced, and that's in the past now. But a prenup is so uncommon, and yet I wish that every couple getting married would consider doing this for a couple of
Mm.
reasons. So if you're out there and you're contemplating marriage to the love of your life, hear me out on this. So a prenup is essentially, I mean, I'm not a lawyer here and I don't write these up. You would go to an estate planning attorney generally, because it is a form of estate planning. And you would disclose all of the assets that each of you are bringing into the marriage. And then you would say, if we were to separate or part, or if one of us was to die, this is what would happen to these assets. It's really important for later life marriages where there's already children from a previous relationship, or even, significant maybe inheritance that has come to one person. It's just having those financial decisions up front and getting it in writing, and then doing all the things you need to do to make sure it can be legally upheld in the event that you need it. It really makes divorce so much easier. Now, that said, I am also fabulously, I'm a very big fan of postnups. So if you
Mm,
are contemplating
mm.
divorce, decide to stay married, one of the things you can do is go to a similar type of, go back to the estate planning lawyer and say, I would like to do a postnuptial agreement where we do the same thing. We actually just get on the same page about how we're going to share finances Who's going to take responsibility for debts? What would happen if one of us were to get hit by the bus tomorrow? And you can have a postnuptial agreement or a postnup that then really clearly lays out what would happen in the event of a separation. So I don't see these often enough. If I ever do tie the knot again, I'm totally getting one, because I think it has the added bonus of getting those financial conversations out there up front. And honestly, if you can't have those sorts of full disclosure financial conversations with someone that you're thinking of marrying, maybe you should think again about actually tying the knot. Oh, because if you don't have a prenup, your default prenup are the divorce laws of the state that you are getting divorced in.
Yes.
That's my one-liner there.
Washington State is a community property state, so you're in a community property marriage, if nothing is differentiated otherwise. And so really important to know. I mean, my mom had a wonderful second marriage to the love of her life, who they were only separated by his death several years ago. But she came into the marriage with some assets that were important to her to preserve. And I don't know that they had a prenup, but they definitely had an understanding of exactly. And I think it was, at least at some point, when they did a will, it was definitely in the legal language of the will that these were her, and they may have been in writing earlier that there was an understanding, of who these assets belong to. And, they both had their own assets, even though they shared everything while they were alive. But, they both had grown kids when they entered into the marriage, and they had assets that they intended to go to those kids. So it was.
Well, and the key is to have the conversations, Kate, while you're in
Yes.
a wonderful, loving frame of mind, because that is often not where you're at once a divorce has been announced. So it's just so much harder.
Yeah, to state what's important to you. I am here. You're listening to Vivitude. I'm here with Shelly Rees Randall. You can find her online at Shelly Rees Coaching. She is specializes in helping folks get divorced, as a divorce coach and financial analyst here in Washington State. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back. And when we come back, I'm going to have Shelly share about the Finance First framework, and also some specific tips for if you are in that situation. And I know a lot of our listeners are caregivers. So if you're in a situation where maybe it doesn't feel like you have a whole lot of extra money to be hiring a lot of people, like, what are some tips on how people can navigate this, and also more about the support that you provide as well. So we'll be right back with Vivitude.
And thanks for listening to Vivitude. 4 hosts, 1 each week. We help you revivitude your next chapter, because purpose, passion, and prosperity isn't out there. They're already within you. Brighter, bolder, truer. Vivitude.